Well, the Texas cover-up is really collapsing tonight, thanks to the relentless reporting by two of our first guests tonight and the singular crusade mounted by one Texas state senator who simply will not give up. The attempt to cover up what happened inside Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, when a mass murderer killed 19 children and 2 teachers is really falling apart. Republican Governor Greg Abbott, with the help of other Republican elected officials, including the local district attorney in Uvalde, seemed to be all working together to cover up what happened inside the school until after Election Day in November, when Greg Abbott is hoping to be reelected over his Democratic opponent, Beto O'Rourke. But the district attorney has been forced to admit that she is not actually investigating anything, even though she publicly requested that everyone remain absolutely silent about what happened in the school until she completed her work, without ever explaining what her work is, since the crime committed in the school was murder and the murderer is dead. Now, the Texas officials have been forced to speak publicly this week. They are in open public conflict with each other, provoking one of them to say the gloves are off. Local Republican officials in Uvalde believe that state Republican officials are trying to lay all of the blame for the bad police work inside the school on the local police, while local officials in Uvalde are demanding more information about what the state police officers were doing inside and outside of the school. And what it all comes down to is the power of the AR-15, the high-powered semi-automatic rifle that made for warfare, that an 18-year-old was able to legally buy and carry into that school to rip human bodies apart. The doctor who saw the bodies of some of the children said that some of them were decapitated by that weapon that held Texas police officers from state and local police forces at bay for over an hour. For over an hour, local Uvalde police and the small police force of the Uvalde School District, along with state police officers and some federal officers, failed to rush into that classroom for over an hour because they were afraid of that weapon. Yesterday, Steve McCraw, the head of the state police forces, said 3 minutes after the murderer entered the school, the police had enough equipment and weapons to try to save the children.
3 minutes after the subject entered the West Building, there was a sufficient number of armed officers wearing body armor to isolate, distract, and neutralize the subject. The only thing stopping a hallway of dedicated officers from entering room 111 and 112 was the on-scene commander, who decided to place the lives of officers before the lives of children. The officers had weapons, the children had none. The officers had body armor, the children had none. The officers had training, the subject had none. 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds. That's how long the children waited and the teachers waited in rooms 111 to be rescued. And while they waited, the on-scene commander waited for a radio and rifles. Then he waited for shields. Then he waited for SWAT. Lastly, he waited for a key that was never needed.
They waited because the police were afraid of what an AR-15 could do to them.
Based on the 100 rounds that he shot in the short amount of time period, could he have done as much damage? I think we all know the logic answer. With a bat or a knife or a revolver? Could he have killed as many people?
No.
The head of the state police forces is blaming the failure of all of the different police departments, all of them, on one person, the chief of the 5-person police force whose only job is to serve the Uvalde School District. Chief Pete Arredondo has refused to testify in public about what he did and did not do inside the school in his capacity as chief of the school police force. But in one interview with the Texas Tribune, he insisted that he spent much of the hour searching for a key to unlock the classroom door. That story was cracked by the New York Times last week in reporting that indicated No one ever checked that the door was locked. Yesterday, the head of the state police testified that the door was not locked. They have indeed proved that. Everyone with the ability to protect Pete Arredondo in Uvalde has been actively protecting him until today, when he was finally placed on administrative leave by the superintendent of the school board that employs Pete Arredondo. That should have happened the day after the mass murder, but it took the school board a month to do that because they had no intention of doing it. They were forced to do that because the cover-up is collapsing. Everyone on the city council was trying to protect Pete Arredondo until last night, when citizens forced the city council in a public meeting to reverse themselves. Pete Arredondo won a seat on the city council and has had every intention of continuing in his police chief job while also serving on the city council. But he has not been able to attend, or has chosen not to attend, any public meetings of the city council because they all occurred after the mass murder in the school that he did nothing to prevent and that he does not want to talk about. The city council and the mayor conspired to have a secret swearing in of Pete Arredondo as a city councilor the week after the mass murders in the school. The mayor and the city council were doing everything they possibly could to protect Pete Arredondo. And last night, they were going to grant Pete Arredondo a special leave of absence from his job as a city councilor so that he could then hold on to his job as a city councilor, because the rule is you're not allowed to miss 3 meetings of the city council, which Pete Arredondo is on the verge of doing. And if they granted him a leave of absence, then he wouldn't be recorded as missing 3 meetings. The plan didn't work because Kim Hammond rose to speak to the city council.
You said we don't have the power to fire him. Let me give you a simple out. You can remove him because he's going to vacate his seat. So your agenda number 6 is a decision on whether or not to give him a leave of absence. Why the hell would you? Let him miss 3 meetings. He's my councilman. Let him miss 3. The investigation's going to come in and tell us all why and what we can do better. What you can do right now is not give him, if he requested it, a leave of absence. Don't give him an out. We don't want him. We want him out. You can do something right now, tonight, and not table whether you're going to decide to give him that leave of absence. I implore you, do not give him that leave of absence.
I've heard you guys, and this bothers me a whole lot. I had an idea when I came in here. I was going to do a very short grant leave of absence so that we had to vote on it over and over and over, so you guys wouldn't see him. But I don't need to talk a whole lot more. I make a motion we do not grant the leave of absence for Councilman Arredondo.
And that was the end of that part of the cover-up. The Republican mayor of Uvalde, who has been helping Pete Arredondo hold on to both of his jobs and who called Beto O'Rourke a sick son of a bitch for questioning Governor Greg Abbott's press conference about the shooting that was full of falsehoods, that same mayor is now very angry at Governor Greg Abbott's people. He's very angry at the people in state government who Governor Abbott is relying on to blame local Uvalde officials.
The gloves are off. As we know it, we will share it. We are not going to hold back anymore. We kept quiet at the request because we thought we were doing a formal investigation and doing the right thing. But yet they can go to Austin and have public deals and talk about it and different things and not share a damn thing with this city or anybody in this community. And that's wrong. That's totally wrong.
The mayor directly attacked the head of the state police force, Steve McGraw, who Governor Abbott inherited from a previous administration, but who Governor Abbott can fire right now.
What kind of farce do you have in Austin today? At least the House had the audacity to keep it in a closed-door session, and we had the Bozo the Clown show at the Senate today with the McGraw and everybody parading out there and giving answers that they still don't have the facts to, and they still don't have the truth to. And yet again, he didn't talk about any other agencies that were there, and also have an accountability to everybody that was there too. Colonel McGraw has an agenda, and it's not to present a full report on what happened and to give factual answers to the families of this community.